Alex is a staff person to our environmental committee here. It used to be called Cool Cities. You've probably heard about those type of groups across the country, and then we changed it over to more of an energy committee because it just sounded too gimmicky. And Alex, I'll let you jump in because you've done a lot of the legwork, and Bill's the chairman of that committee, so I'll let you guys tag team a little bit.
Yep. We've had a committee going for probably about 4 years now, and we've sort of worked through a variety of issues, variety of topics, advised on a few things, certainly done some energy audits, done some work figuring out what the carbon footprint for the town looked like, really learning where a lot of the emissions are coming from. I think probably if I were to jump into one thing that I think has possibly been the greatest success thus far of the committee, we were able to put through a small wind power ordinance, which is essentially set up in a nutshell such that as long as you're putting up a windmill that isn't commercial size, as long as it's one that's being used for relatively low amounts of power generated, not like a commercial windmill, there's not very much in the way of restrictions on it. So it enables people to put up a home-sized windmill. Makes it very permissible for that. Most communities will have restrictions on height and a lot of restrictions that are geared more towards keeping a commercial wind farm from popping up in their backyard.
One of the things you need to understand, because you probably don't get into the town government piece too often, is that a typical town would take months to go through a planning board. Here it's a building permit at the counter and you can go home that afternoon and put your windmill up. So it's that type of difference why we felt very strongly that if people wanted to do this, we wanted to figure out a way to encourage it. So
we did for the past year on the committee was we had put together a presentation, PowerPoint presentation on how to do home energy audits and how to figure out how you're doing comparatively and how to make your home more energy efficient and so forth. And it was kind of neat because we gave it to the council, but it was also on public access channel, and it's also on the town website, so people can go on there and click on that, and there's actually a form, a template they can go in there and plug in their numbers to do their own little audit to see if they're doing well or not well and so forth. Because we have a lot of older houses.
Lands and Conservation Commission, and they have a charter to look at trying to keep, as one of their major points is trying to keep as much space, open space as we can for our community. And they do that as a citizens group, and they work very hard. They have done many initiatives over the years. I think the one that I'm most proud is the trailway system that we're putting in, the hiking, walking trailway and bike system.
you have town councilors on each committee. They're liaison to the committees, so we have over 200 people in the community that volunteer for different types of committees, from land use to solid waste to personnel policy to all kinds of different things. And also my staff, somebody from either myself or Alex or a member of my staff will staff each one of those committees, so we're all communicating and we try to stay connected, so one committee isn't going this way and another's going this way. It's pretty rare that we butt heads at the committee level. May disagree on policy and stuff, but it's usually not because of a lack of knowledge, it's because of change different opinions.
Good. I did want to go back to one of your questions about setting up the original committee. It was difficult. It was not so much difficult getting town approval by any stretch. They were more than happy to sponsor it. Pulling everyone together was a very interesting process. We started off with a lot of very differing visions as to how it wants to go, because climate change is a global issue, and we're just one little committee. And how does one small town committee find a way to agree on what they're going to do, and even if they get to a point of agreeing, find things where you can really truly get something done and really make a difference. And at a local level, that can actually be a very tricky process, trying to figure out those things. And that process, that first 6 months of us really figuring out what we wanted to be when we grew up, was definitely a very interesting process. Definitely a few meetings that were at the very early on, a bit on the rocky side, before we really started to hone in on focusing what we could do, focusing on the things we could do, not going global, not trying to preach too much, and really just focus on very practical things we could get done, like ordinances, like education on very basic things. Like we realized the overwhelming majority of our carbon emissions were coming from our houses. It's the methods by which our houses are heated and the amount of insulation in our houses, and those two very basic things were accounting for a very large percentage of the emissions coming out of our town. We're not a community where we can do a ton with the car emissions just because we're such a commuter town and so decentralized. So busing and trains aren't really as practical in a community like ours. So it really did come down to a whole lot of houses all heated by number 2 fuel. What can we do to change that? And so focusing in and getting to the point where we can really focus in on those kind of things was definitely a process, and it took some doing and a lot of sort of soul searching along the way with the committee, realizing it'd be great to work on this, but it's not practical in the local level. So.
I think though that small successes breed more enthusiasm. So like there's a lot of stuff you have all shared that I didn't know. And I've lived in this town, well, not that long, about 12, 13 years, but this stuff I really care about, and I'm thrilled. And I keep thinking, how can we let people know about this? You know, and you guys work hard. I don't want to add more to you, but that's sort of my question is how do you create a public relations opportunity? And how do you sort of, because I had a woman come up to me the other day at the playground, and she said, you know, I understand you're really interested in green issues. And I said, yeah. And she said, well, I really want to help. And that happens all the time. And so if we can create, I don't know if it's a huge committee or if it's a couple people, just creating projects that are limited in scope, and that everybody feels like, okay, I can do that piece. I can't take on a 3-year commitment to once a month meeting, but I can do a project that has a success at the end. And
share the reality slap.
Right.
With the economy we've been in, my staff, I've got 25% people less than I had 5 years ago. A lot of layoffs, a lot of people doing more with less, and all that cliche type stuff. That is a challenge. It's you're trying to get a lot of good ideas out there, and it's hard to get a group of people energized enough to follow and to follow through. If it's not sustainable, then how many starts and stops do you want to go through before you say, come to me with a plan and we'll work as hard as we can to implement it for you. But the difficulty that I see, and not just our town, but all the towns around us, is just time. People just don't have that amount of time to commit. And unfortunately, in government and in municipalities, sometimes three years is a short time frame to get things done. And unfortunately, because you're trying to bring it out to different policymakers and to different areas, we try not to set people up for failures. And you know, maybe we should allow more people to fail, but I don't think that's a healthy way to go forward. If it looks like it's not going to get the support of different groups or committees, I try not to get people up and running and then hit a brick wall and stop. So, but there have been a lot of good initiatives we've implemented. I think your idea about trying to get an environmental group together is a great one, and if you can get 3 or 4 people, we'll put the committee together in a heartbeat for you. But what I don't want you to do is not go into this without open eyes, because it is difficult. It's not so much the funding, it's not so much the mission, it's not so much that. It's getting people engaged and getting people committed for even 6 months is hard sometimes. So, and you've seen it in even your own committees.
Yeah, peaks and valleys, like you said.
Peaks and valleys. You guys are a peak right now, so thank you for coming.
And I would say too, I started a club at school, and I can definitely relate to what you're saying, that sometimes it's difficult to get people to come and sit in a meeting, because people, they just don't want to do it. They don't want to sit, and they don't want to listen to people speak. But I will say, just a testament to what you said, is that if people feel that they're being useful and are doing something, that a lot of times that is a different story. So I definitely do think that there is a common ground between you.
Absolutely. So get a planning committee for projects. Set those projects up, regardless if there's 1, 2, or 5, and then see what you can build from that.
So, what do we do to get a bike path put in on Route 9? And he said, well, it's a state road. Or he said, talk to your town. And then I was talking to some neighbors who were saying the same thing, because we would love to have people biking. I mean, I'd love to have my family biking. I'd love to have my husband bike to work. He does, but it's really scary biking on Route 9. And I know it involves people's property. I know it's complicated. I know it's expensive, but so much excitement when I just just having conversations with people. They say, "Yeah, that would be fantastic." And I know you're committed to having a walk in town, and I just wonder about So anyway, my point is that when you start talking about this with people say, "That's the coolest thing." And I think when you get people fired up, then they're willing to commit to. I don't know what's involved in doing that. I know it's big, but
Then they run into the funding roadblock.
It's a state road, so it would be all on the town requirement. The paved shoulders that are on Route 88 started 22 years ago, and they just got done 2 summers ago. And it was start, stop, and then finally the state said, we're not going to fund it, and the town had to basically spend $4.2 million on doing the whole project. So it's those type of hurdles, roadblocks, whatever you want to call them, that are very difficult when you're dealing outside of the municipality and dealing with state agencies. It's just they don't have the money either to do it.
Right.
What you see out there for paving is a joke. It's a half-inch of driveway seal almost that basically got put down to kind of hold things together for another few years. And it looks awful because none of the shoulders were done, and they'd be awful to ride on. If you guys were out there on Route 9, stay away from the shoulders because it'll destroy your bikes.
Yeah,
They're
it's
awful.
terrible.
They're all broken up, and it's awful.
But anyway, so
But it's hard.
but-
But we've done everything from Route 1 all the way to Route 100 is going to be all paved shoulders all the way up through. So we are every time we do a municipal project, we are definitely implementing shoulders of some type. And then when we tried to do the ones on Route 88, we had a referendum to fight the project. So it's like you can make some of the people happy, and we
Right.
won that vote by 26 votes. So
Right.
it's that type of stuff that does happen.
Just a comment and a question. I'll bring the question first. Do you know where the state of Maine ranks in quality of bike riding compared to other states? Do you? There was a survey that was done, and I think Maine is in the top 5.
Yeah, I was gonna say
It
it's
is.
probably pretty good,
It
at
is.
least compared to
It's-
Pennsylvania.
It's one of the better states for riding bikes,
Oh, wow.
by the way, which is surprising. We see areas of improvement that we could do, but it's up there. And I spent time in Colorado once in a while. I look at their network of biking and walking, and they were like in the bottom 20%. So it's just how you perceive it. You have to look. I don't know how the survey was really done or the assessment, but we're one of the more bicycle-friendly states in the union. So I'm a kind of a Philadelphia guy. Been sitting here for 55 minutes, us giving you information. What are you going to give us now? Now, what I'm asking, you've been biking around. Have you seen something? I think Bill was trying to get this from you before. Have you seen something as you ride around that you think, oh, that's really a good idea, or something could be improved on, not just in our community here, but all that riding you have done, 600 miles.
Yeah.
So have you seen anything that, in your eyes, that you could share with us that could help us?
Yeah. I mean, we've seen a lot. I mean, I don't know. We've seen a lot of
Have you
things.
seen things when you get after your ride, you get back together and you start talking? Do you see that mess over there? What have you seen that that could maybe be improved, or maybe give us some thoughts or some ideas?
It's really hard because a lot of times we'll spend only a week in each community, so by the time we leave, we maybe even have like a small feel for what goes on there. And we've seen a lot of different projects, and as we go along, we do mention projects to other towns. But I think sometimes it's really difficult for us because we don't have that in-depth understanding of what happens. So for us to sit here and be like, oh, well, you definitely need to do this, is really hard. But I will say, at least for me, and I'm sure we all have different things that we've learned along the way, is one thing that I think has been really successful, and it might just be because I have a personal interest in it and I've seen that it works, is I guess you could say economic focus, and kind of finding a way to teach people something without making it seem like you're teaching it to them. Because we find a lot of times that the environmental things or those priorities are things that sometimes can be logical and the smart things to do in many other situations. So finding different ways to approach it, and maybe not always saying, oh, we need to do this because it's environmentally friendly, but we need to do this because it's logical and it makes sense monetarily. That has been so successful. So whatever you're doing from that aspect, like that auditing project, sounds really great. But I will say one thing that I wish I would have seen more in a lot of communities, and I think is a large frustration, is a lot of what Lala has been saying, that there have been individuals who are like, yes, I would support that, I would do something, but there isn't really an outlet for them to do that. Or again, there are a lot of organizations doing a lot of awesome things, but they don't really have a way to communicate with each other or a way to move forward together, because again, all these individuals have the same, a lot of times, shared values and priorities, but there's just like a lack of bridge, which I mean is understandable, because we're all doing our own thing. Do I have an answer to how to solve that? No.
Well,
but
and not that I do either, but we were in Belfast 2 weeks ago, and to rank all of our towns, I would say that's one town that's got their stuff together. I mean, they are progressive. They've just got a lot going on.
You could have seen 20 years ago.
What's that?
You could have seen 20 years ago. It was awful.
Really? Well, yeah, I know they've got stuff with Pin Bay it's made a huge turnaround, which is great, and they've got this transition town initiative, which do you guys have that?
Transition town.
So we've seen this in a couple places. In Lewiston, it's in existence, but I think it's one couple just kind of like running it from their house, and it's not actually doing that much. But and we saw in Rockland too, and I feel like they've got their stuff together as well. But in Belfast, it's called the Belfast Area Transition Town Initiative, and it's kind of an umbrella for just various environmental projects going on in the town. So you just pull people from all over. You've got like we did spraying the stencils to mark the drainage, whatever drains, and I mean just right. So just people doing different projects from different organizations all kind of fall under this one same category. And I think that's something I hadn't heard of until this summer. I have no idea if Nashville has that. I'm sure that we don't. But I feel like that's the kind of thing that just needs to start springing up all over the place, is this one group that brings together all the ideas, all the people, and then just makes it stronger. That's definitely one thing that I've seen as a possible solution.
Was this a nonprofit? Or what
No,
was it?
I don't even know.
they were just like
This
local members of the community who met on a weekly basis to
This
kind of
is
talk
in-
about the different things going on.
It's not just in Maine, it's in multiple states.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's around the world. It's based on, it's basically a plan to make like the town very, like, reliant on the town, so you're not reliant on other, like the national infrastructure or international infrastructure. And a lot of their focus is on food, growing food in a way that you don't need pesticides, but you also can grow food year round. And it also focuses on like using the food in a way that doesn't require a lot of work or like a lot of labor, so you don't need a lot of people farming. It's like people have different gardens. What we did in Belfast was go to something called a permablitz, which is like permaculture is like permanent agriculture is the idea they use for agriculture in transition towns. And basically what we did was we just went, it was like 10 or so of us went to someone's house and helped them get started on a garden. We like built a path for them, we dug holes for trees, things like that, and helped them kind of plan out how the garden would work, so that it was kind of a community way to come together, and we had like lunch together and things like that. But it's like it seemed to bring together so many different groups. Like the Watershed Coalition was kind of big, but like people in there were in the Transition Town Initiative. So it seems like it's kind of like a framework for doing it.
With the transition thing, its name speaks what it is. It speaks about, or just focuses on this issue of we're not going to be able to live the way that we are living right now for much longer, in the sense that, with climate change, you're going to start to see major changes in the environment, but then also you're going to run out of oil eventually. There are changes that are going to be forced upon us if we don't recognize them now. And so it's talking about how to transition into this future world where we will have to be less reliant on fuel, on these goods that we think we must have that really we probably don't. So for example, I just turned in my notes from Rockland, where we met with the guy from the Transition Town Initiative, and he'd spoken about how they'd had 3 different potlucks this summer, and each kind of addressed a different theme. So the first one, and it all follows this idea of thinking about Rockland in the future. So first question was, what is your vision of Rockland 20 years from now? What skills do you have, or what skills do you want or need to acquire for this future? And what kinds of projects can we envision to put this future into reality. And so I think people responded very well to that, just wanting to get like their bits out and talk about, realistically speak about what is actually going to happen soon, not far from now. So I think that's a really cool idea, and I don't know how you go about setting up an official transition town initiative, but I mean those are two different towns, Rockland and Belfast, that would definitely be good people to speak with if that is something that you guys are interested in.
Well, that's how our energy committee started. Somebody said we should start a cool cities committee in town, and sent us to the website, and you know, it just takes one to start the start the ball. That's a great idea. Those are great examples as well. That's fairly impressive. And I bet we could pull some people together. I think of Karen Martin, who's doing our community food garden now, and the group that she's got to pull from all the time. So that's pretty cool.
Go ahead.
Do you have like a community bike center? Like we visited when we were in Biddeford. We visited the community bike center, and they have this thing called the Bike Doctor, and they ride to different neighborhoods within the town to fix kids' bikes. And they actually fixed our bikes when we volunteered with them. And it was just Biddeford.
Oh, Biddeford. Okay.
And like that was just like, yes, it was strictly focused on bicycling, but that encourages people to bicycle. And so I don't know how you guys.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
That could be like a project suggestion if you guys go ahead and try to continue with like a transition. I don't know if that's what you would want to call it, but like a group of people organizing something like that. That could be a cool project.
Under-resourced?
Under-resourced children who
Sounds
are
like
all
me.
amped about riding their bikes everywhere now. I mean, they don't take the bus to school. They don't take the bus to go see their friends. They all bike to each other. So that was exciting to see, and that's only because this community center has pulled them in and like taught them bike maintenance, taught them leadership skills, and just like they take them on mountain bike rides once a week. They have like an in-city or in-town ride once a week. More of a mountain ride once a week.
So riding their bike almost becomes second nature.
For high schools as well, we met with one group called Cultivating Community, and they help high schools get community, like school gardens in there, and like help them like try to get students to like work in the gardens and things like that and grow their own food and kind of be knowledgeable about that. And they were the same ones who are working with like Somali immigrants, working with them, and so they're a great resource for anything garden related.
Yeah, no, I know about them. It's really cool.
So I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know it's been a while, but do you have any other questions before?
When are you coming back?
Next summer.